soon.
How are your property taxes looking, Cook County residents? Maybe you're shocked they've gone up. Maybe you're pleasantly surprised they've gone down. Maybe you're ho-hum that they've stayed the same. Tonight's debate is for you. There's a closely contested race for the office that sets the values that those tax rates are based on, the Cook County Assessor's Office. Incumbent Fritz Kagi faces a challenge from his former employee, longtime assessor Pat Hines. The stakes couldn't be higher. Our Chicago Report's Cook County Assessor debate begins now. And welcome, everybody, to our latest Chicago Report primary debate tonight, the all-important race for Cook County Assessor. First, a few ground rules to lay out. We will conduct this, as we have for all our debates, in the form of a panel discussion. I'll moderate with questions. There are no opening or closing statements and no time limits. I'll reserve the right to cut candidates off if they speechify or avoid the question. And without further ado, let's meet our candidates. First, we have Fritz Kagi. Mr. Kagi is seeking his third term as Cook County Assessor, having taken over for longtime former Assessor Joe Barrios. And prior to that, Mr. Kagi was an investment manager. Pat Hines. Mr. Hines has worked for 23 years in the Cook County Assessor's Office, including under Kagi, and he is currently the elected assessor for Lyons Township. Mr. Hines lives in Western Springs, Mr. Kagi in Oak Park. I'm from River Forest. We've got the western suburbs of Cook County, the lovely western suburbs represented here. Let's have a great debate. Thank you both for being here. I want to start with the news this year that median residential property tax bills rose 16.7% last year. It's the largest hike in 30 years. How come?
I think it's unfair and it shouldn't have happened, and I'm concerned. The reason why is my assessments, if they'd not been changed, homeowners would have had less share of the burden, and in 2/3 of our neighborhoods in Chicago, bills would have been flat or down. But in a pattern that's continued from past years in the suburbs, big commercial properties got cuts at the Cook County Board of Review Commissioners. Every single cut and break that those commercial properties get passed on to our homeowners. And it has a number. It added $700 to the bills of every single homeowner in Chicago, in a lot of neighborhoods that accounted for all the increase, like in Englewood, in Austin, in South Shore, neighborhoods that would have had a decrease, like West Englewood, had an increase instead. So that's what happened. I'm concerned it shouldn't happen.
And so you're saying that folks that go to the Cook County Board of Review to appeal, those 3 elected commissioners, that is a culprit here. Mr. Hines, do you agree? Is it the Board of Review, are they mostly responsible for these hikes?
No, I would disagree. So while there's a median increase, let's examine where it actually landed. So the west side, the south side, they received an enormous spike in the property tax burden, while Lincoln Park, Lakeview, Roscoe Village, they received a very mild property tax increase. And that's a result of choices made for the assessment. The assessment spiked in North Lawndale by 130%, Englewood up 98%. So there's a spike in certain portions of the city of Chicago, and then a very mild reassessment.
And we're looking at a map now, so the darker blue is where they've spiked.
Yeah, so the heat map pretty much matches where the spikes are. And so in certain parts of the city of Chicago, Roscoe Village, for instance, had a 5% increase in its assessment year over year, which resulted actually in some of the taxpayers having a lower tax burden 1 year over year. Yet in the very dark portions where we saw the spike in assessment in North Lawndale and Englewood, West Garfield Park, you see a doubling of the residential tax burden.
But you're saying it's specific choices in the assessors.
I'm saying if there was a shift because of the Board of Review, why didn't it land evenly? Why did it only land on the west side? Why did it only land on the south side? Those were choices made in the assessment.
Mr. Kagi, choices made in the assessment? Why do you want to answer that?
Well, my choices in the assessments would have led to property tax bills being down in 2/3 or flat in 2/3 of Chicago's neighborhoods. Our assessments follow market values. Our studies have shown that for the first time in the history of this office, our residential assessments are in line with market. But why did bills go up more in some neighborhoods in percentage terms than others? Because in some of our south side and west side communities, that $700 that was passed on to them by those cuts by the Board of Review Commissioners, those tax breaks that they got, that doubled the bill in some neighborhoods, like Englewood. Their bills would have been flat, but if you if you add $700 to that bill, that's a big increase. The bills in the north side are higher, and so the percentage increase is lower. But I want to be clear. This shouldn't have happened, and it's unfair, and I'm concerned. So we need to make sure that those big cuts for commercial properties that are driven by property tax appeals lawyers that are board review commissioners don't happen. I've been on the side of homeowners since I've been in this office.
And we want to get to the whole makeup of the board of review and this system that can get so convoluted. But Mr. Hines, this follows a recent Sun-Times investigation that found the property tax burden has continued to shift from downtown loop properties. I mean, this is where most of the money is, clearly, because these are very expensive properties. It's shifted from there to residential homeowners. Why is this shift taking place?
Well, again, the shift isn't even. You know, the shift is landing in certain places and not in other places. And that has a lot to do with the way that the assessments are coming out of the county assessor's office. So he just said that we follow the market. Assessor Kagi did the assessment in 2021 for the city of Chicago, also did the assessment in 2024 for the city of Chicago. Those are both his numbers. And so when I talked to taxpayers in North Lawndale, and I went to a protest where they were setting their tax bills on fire, they were so upset about it. I met taxpayers who saw a doubling of their assessment in 3 years, 2.5 times as much. I met someone whose assessment went up 500%. Now, those taxpayers know that they cannot sell their property for 500% more than they could have 3 years ago. And so a lot of this injustice that they feel is because the assessments that are coming out of the assessor's office do not match the market.
Well, let me ask you this. Should you be elected, what would you do differently to make sure that those rates in those neighborhoods weren't going up?
Well, number one, we would clean up the underlying data used to produce the assessment. So right now, the data that's used to produce the assessment creates an unjust result. And so the garbage data that the county assessor has that they're putting through their modeling does not produce a credible result on the other side. Taxpayers know this. They're very frustrated with the results that are coming out of the office, the tax bills that they receive. They don't have any faith that that represents a fair and equitable distribution of the burden. And so it's very important that we have experience and competence to produce an assessment that taxpayers can have faith in that doesn't have wild swings in it. Right now we have far too much volatility in the assessments that are coming out of the office of the county assessor.
I'll give you the chance to respond, Mr. Kagi. Are they garbage data that you're inputting here to determine these assessment rates?
Data can always improve, but we mustn't make a fetish about data, because what the data we have does show is that our assessments for commercial properties have been, on average, accurate, and that they're being cut by 25% too low in some years, 10% too low in other years by the Cook County Board of Review. And that is shifting hundreds of millions of dollars of burden onto homeowners, and you don't have to take my word for it. It's not even a debate anymore. It's a fact. It comes from the Treasurer's Office data. She showed that $2 billion had been shifted onto our homeowners in the south suburbs here in Chicago by cuts on commercial properties, and that 90% of those were happening on commercial properties, and it was almost all at the board review. And the choice before the viewers tonight and the voters is that I've never taken a dime from property tax appeals lawyers. They make a lot of money. They make a commission off of this. And my opponent's his campaign's being bankrolled by property tax appeals lawyers. That was the pay-to-play culture that was in our office before I came into office. You could come in the morning, donate to the assessor's campaign, and in the evening be asking for reductions in commercial property values. And that is a problem. My opponent in 22 upheld the standard that we set, not taking donations from these people. The Inspector General has said it's wrong, but my opponent has embraced those donations with gusto.
All right, so let me, before I get you to respond, Mr. Hines, I should explain to the viewers this industry of property tax appeal attorneys that make money taking on clients, going to the Board of Review to try and get those assessments dropped. And some of the notable property tax appeal attorneys over the years: Michael Madigan, Ed Burke, John Cullerton, Pat Quinn, so on and so forth. A lot of notable names. So, Mr. Hines, the Kagi campaign alleges you've taken $87,000 from property tax appeal attorneys. Does that mean you're going to favor them and their clients in your assessments?
No. So let's look at an independent study that was done on the donations for both of our campaigns. The Real Deal did an investigation into the source of funds for my campaign, the source of funds for my opponent's campaign. And what they found is that Assessor Kagi received over $400,000 of campaign donations from real estate interests. We had just over $200,000 of donations from real estate interests. So let's make this an even playing field. Let's be honest about where the source of funds are coming from. What Assessor Kagi would like to try and do is present the voters with a false choice. That their choice is either the failures of a corrupt administration from prior to his administration or the failings of a current administration that's not getting the job done. That is not our choice. We actually have a third choice. We can choose an assessor who has 30 years of experience, who has a record of advocating for taxpayers. Right now, when you ask what should taxpayers do, what do homeowners do when they're about to lose their home, his answer is it's somebody else to blame, it's somewhere else that you should look. It doesn't help folks who are about to lose their home from these volatile property tax spikes. When we have this distraction about where the source of funds are coming. He's accepted more money from real estate interests than our campaign has. The overwhelming majority of the funds for our campaign come from middle-class taxpayers who are upset and angry about what's coming out of the county assessor's office.
All right, well, I mean, you both receive money from real estate interests, but you're saying, whether it's property tax appeal lawyers or real estate interests, Mr. Kagi, aren't they looking for something from your office?
Of course, they're always looking for something from our office, and that's why it's so important to have someone who doesn't have conflicts, who's been associated with the pay-to-play culture. If you're taking a campaign donation from a property tax appeals lawyer in the morning, and then they're asking for a favor for you in the afternoon, the Inspector General, not me, has said that's a critical vulnerability to our system. They've called for ethics rules that would eliminate those donations at the Board of Review and at my office. I adopted that. I've never taken a dime from property tax appeals lawyers. And Pat, with all due respect, I don't think anyone in the commercial property industry would say that I'm favoring them. You took a donation, I noticed last night, from Michael Madigan's partner. What's going on with that?
Are you talking about law partner, former law partner?
Yeah, one of his law partners. He reported it last night. Michael Madigan's sitting in jail. You know, the federal prosecutors show that he made $40 million off of the backs of our property homeowners. It was people like that who went to high school with me who were hurt by this appeal system, by this pay-to-play system. And you just took donations from the partner of the guy who worked with Mike Madigan. What's up with that?
All right, what's up with that?
So Paris, I've never met Mike Madigan. But Assessor Kagi was mentioned in Mike Madigan's trial. And so when we're talking about this right now, what are we not talking about? We're not talking about the taxpayers. We're not talking about the volatility that's coming out of his office. We're not talking about the homeowners who are terrified about whether or not they're going to be able to hang on to their homes. In the reassessment that happened last year in the Southland, when you look at the spike and the thousands of dollars that people were asked to pay, we have delinquency rates in the Southland of 30%, 40%. We have people who are flat out going to lose their homes. And he doesn't want to talk about that. He wants to talk about someone I've never met while he's been mentioned in the man's trial.
But just for the sake of, all right, for the sake of perception, why accept money from property tax attorneys just to give, you know, residents the notion that you aren't going to favor them?
So there are very few, when I am on the campaign trail, who feel that property taxes are going well right now. And that includes property tax attorneys, that includes the real estate industry, that includes labor, that includes regular folks, all of whom have supported this campaign. There is a broad range of support for this campaign. The Cook County Democratic Party has endorsed us in this campaign. We have the overwhelming majority of township assessors that are supporting us for this campaign. The overwhelming majority of elected aldermen that are supporting us for this campaign. So when you have a broad range of folks who are aggrieved by a county assessor's office that is not functional, you're going to find a broad range of support.
With all due respect, I think to the viewers out there, you know, every single person in Chicago and Cook County knows how rigged the Cook County assessor's office and our property tax system was. And property tax appeals lawyers were intimately associated with that, and people are sitting in jail because of that. That needed to change. This is why I ran for that office, because there is a connection between people's bills going up in the neighborhoods and property tax appeals lawyers getting paid commissions for big reductions on commercial properties. It is intricately linked. I have fought that. I've never taken a dime from property tax appeals lawyers, but other people in the system do take that, and that's what drives people's bills up. And I'm sorry Pat doesn't see what's wrong with that, but that is the choice in this election. I mean, you really grew up in a culture in the assessor's office that took those donations. That's what was wrong. And I think the property tax appeals lawyers, from whom you've taken donations from hundreds of them, they see something in you. Maybe you might not have talked to Mike Madigan, but they see something in you. They think you're going to be in the tank for them, that you'll make money for them and their commercial clients, and that's a problem.
And so
again, Paris,
you've been in that office for 23 years.
Again, this is a false choice that he's trying to place here, that the choice in the election is between a failed, corrupt office that that preceded him, a failed office now that he has of incompetence. There's a third choice, to have a competent assessor who's been advocating for taxpayers for 30 years.
If the measure of competence is how the office was run under the Barrios administration, taking donations from property tax appeals lawyers, I don't think the viewers
want any
part of that.
We know that Joe Barrios, the former assessor, had all kinds of issues with conflict of interest and a very poor appeals process, as studies after studies showed. But I want to get back to the issue. Let's go back to the Loop. Mr. Kagi, vacancy rates in these Loop buildings have not recovered much since the pandemic. Buildings are being sold at big losses. Is there anything that can be done from the assessor's office to reverse this trend, or is this simply just an economic issue?
Absolutely. There are things that we can do. First of all, the key is to have a fair assessment system that's predictable, that investors can work with. Also, we need to make sure that those office buildings that are suffering aren't picking up the burden for other commercial buildings that are getting huge breaks at the Cook County Board of Review Commissioners. Take data centers. There's a $50 billion publicly traded company that owns the biggest data center downtown. They got a huge cut. They're paying less than they were before last year because of the cut at the Board of Review. That's a burden that's not only passed on to our homeowners, but to those other office building owners when they're doing the same things for big industrial properties or hotels. That's why we need to have a system that's fair based on market values, where values are not being cut 25% too low, as recent studies have shown, because that makes everyone else pick up the tab for them. That's what we cannot afford.
All right, Mr. Hines, what would you do in the assessment?
So I would agree with Assessor Kagi that we need predictability in our assessments, and that our investors would like to see some predictability out of the county assessor's office. They're not receiving that right now. One of the things that I'm very excited about is that should we be successful, we will implement a public-facing office of economic development in the county assessor's office. Right now, for those who wish to invest in Cook County, they can't predict what their future property tax burden is going to be. So if you're going to invest in a $120 million project to build a multi-story building, mixed use, one of the first questions that you're going to have is, what's my tax burden going to be? Right now, they're left to guess, because the numbers that are coming out of the county assessor's office are all over the board. So we're going to flat out tell people what their assessments are, or what our score is going to be, what the assessment is going to be. So if you know you're going to build a 200,000 square foot warehouse with clear ceiling spans, so many overhead doors, there's no reason that the county assessor's office can't model that for them, score it, give them some predictability. And the hope is that will allow people to underwrite their loans, to allow to pencil out whether it's a go or a no-go for that investment, and to get people building again in this county. Because while we're arguing about the division between the assessment and the built environment as it sits today, I want you to also consider the projects that were never got out of the ground. Those projects...
And there's a lot of projects like, say, in the West Loop or something where they are kind of stalled and that we don't have enough cranes.
And the more that we can grow our base, the lower that we can make our rates, the lower we can bring our burdens.
All right,
I got to say, there's several cranes turning in Fulton Market. And by the way, looking over your left shoulder, there are two 72-story towers going up on 400 Lakeshore Drive, which took a substantial amount of financing, and they're going up. And that happened because an affordable housing bill that we got passed in Springfield is incentivizing the company that's doing this to put up two 72-story towers. Those will be some of the tallest buildings in Chicago. They're putting people to work, and it got passed because it's happening because of a bill that we had that makes it easier for investors to build apartments. We need new supply, especially in affordable housing communities.
Governor Pritzker dealt with that in his State of the State, that there needs to be more supply. I think everybody agrees to that. Mr. Hines, I want to read a little snippet from the Tribune, which endorsed, the Trib Ed board endorsed your opponent, saying, quote, Hines isn't the solution to the problem. He has the vibe of a disgruntled ex-employee, a former Kagi worker turned bitter rival. We found some of Hines' aggressive rhetoric off-putting, and when it came down to it, we did not think he had a clearly articulated plan of demonstrable fairness, and we really do not want to go back to the bad old Barrios days, which would tempt us to move to California. Are you a disgruntled former Kagi worker just turned bitter?
I am not a disgruntled former worker, so I am a tenacious taxpayer advocate. and front and center in the work that I do is advocating for my taxpayers. And I've been doing it for 30 years on the front lawns, in the field, assessing right where the people are. And I've had thousands of conversations with taxpayers, emotional conversations, because your home is the most emotional asset that you will ever own. And when you have these conversations and you realize that people are really struggling to hold on to their homes, you take that personally. And so when things aren't going well, when you get volatile assessments that come out of the county assessor's office, when you constantly meet taxpayers who are at risk of losing their home and some, frankly, who have lost their home, I'm passionate about making sure that we get this assessment right, because when we get it wrong, we flat out cost people their housing. And so I am laser focused on bringing down property tax rates, bringing down residential property tax burdens, keeping people in their homes, also getting us building again. The affordability crisis that we have in this city is out of control. Rent has out of control inflation, and part of that is supply. How do we supply the market? We have to get rid of these volatile property tax swings. And one of the ways that we can get people building again is with our public-facing Office of Economic Development. Flat out tell folks who are willing to invest in this county exactly what the burdens are going to be so that we get building again. So we supply our residential market, we have downward pressure on rents, downward pressure on tax rates, downward pressure on residential tax bills.
What about that for an economic office like that to just give folks some predictability?
We do that. We have a director of commercial assessment outreach. We worked with, for example, the folks who are investing in the new quantum project. We told them how they'd be assessed before they came in. They chose Chicago. They're going to be investing billions of dollars. We wrote a new incentive that is in place for encouraging investment in semiconductors and quantum, and it's an exciting new industry for us here. But I want to go back to the Tribune endorsement, because I think everyone out there should check it out, and not just for the quote that you had and what they said about me, but also they said that my opponent is going to be favoring commercial properties. And I think that's what people in the property tax appeals industry, people who've donated to Trump, are laser focused on. That's where the laser focus is. Why are hundreds of property tax appeals lawyers donating to my opponent's campaign and not me? They know that I'm the guy who battles for homeowners, who's gone to bat for them, who doesn't take donations from property tax appeals lawyers. And by the way, he took a donation from the lawyer who represented Trump Tower and got them a big cut that saved them millions and put burdens on a homeowner.
Didn't Ed Burke represent Trump Tower?
Well, yeah, after Ed Burke was sent to jail, they hired a new lawyer. That guy donated
Burke wasn't
to him.
Available anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get you to respond. Okay, you quick.
There's only one guy at this table who's reduced the value on Trump Tower, and he's sitting right here. So he's done it twice. He's also refunded $300,000 to Trump himself. And so if we're going to have this conversation, let's be honest about it. So he's changed his value on Trump Tower. He has lowered the value on Trump Tower. I have not done so. I am laser focused on lowering property tax rates and lowering the burden on residential property taxpayers and keeping people in their homes.
Harris, I got to correct the record here because he's not being honest with the viewers. Trump Tower is paying more taxes than they ever did before I came into this office, and we raised their assessment, and it was cut substantially by 33% by the board review this year, and that's the fact.
Okay, so once again, the board review. We're going to get to more stuff. We got to take a break here, and when we come back, how about a Bears stadium in Arlington Heights? What do the assessor candidates think about that tax deal that could be on deck? Right after this. And welcome back. Welcome back to this debate between the two candidates. For Cook County Assessor, we have the incumbent Fritz Kagi and challenger Pat Hines. You know, right now the state is negotiating a bill that would give potential Bears mega development in Arlington Heights, Cook County, the opportunity to avoid paying taxes on the assessed value and instead negotiate their rates directly with Arlington Heights. Is that something you support?
Well, I'm concerned. I want to see the details about this bill. I'm actually supported by the legislators who represent Arlington Heights. You know, we've looked at this. The key thing is we want the investment to happen in Cook County, but the thing that I'm concerned about is we don't want to be making concessions that the next generation of people who have to be paying property taxes have to live with, while we here, 20 years hence, maybe aren't thinking about them. This was a mistake that was made with the parking meters bill, where it was a 72-year deal. And I used to be an investor. I know that if you're investing, if you're looking beyond 25 years, it's not really affecting the present value of your investment. So I think it's important that we encourage investments, but I also don't want concessions being made that affect the next generation. There's so many young people who want to become homeowners who feel like it's out of reach. We can't be making concessions that hurt them, 30 years or more ahead in time. So that's what I want to learn more about in the legislation.
Mr. Hines, is this a good idea? I mean, could this deprive money from the school district there, from local governments?
Yeah, I would prefer to know a little. Last version of the bill that I saw was a little too broad, that it would affect all development. And what I'm concerned about is whether the Southland, should we have a mega development down there, would they be able to defend themselves? Would they always be asking for a payment in lieu of taxes instead of paying their fair share?
Well, we're talking about Arlington Heights, though.
I understand, but the bill is written very broadly. It can be applied anywhere.
It can be applied, okay.
And so, sure,
if there's a mega development.
If there's a mega development deal, sure, we develop in Arlington Heights and we get the what they were hoping to see. But will there be an unintended consequence? Will there be future mega developments that come out and then local municipalities aren't able to defend themselves against a large developer who would like to avoid paying their fair share of property taxes and do a payment in lieu of taxes?
And
that's one thing
it could be a race to the bottom, too, because if some people are getting a concession for a $100 million apartment building or $200 million office building, I think other people who own those properties are right to ask, why didn't I get that deal? And then suddenly everyone's getting it. We've heard all sorts of stories from other states about, stadiums getting huge concessions, and I don't think anyone wants that to happen in the state where there's huge giveaways made to billionaires.
So you're concerned, both of you are concerned of whether this is narrowly tailored to just the Bears here. I mean, it seems like it's moving in that direction. The Bears will get this legislation, and it doesn't open the door to everybody going to Springfield saying, well, they got a tax break. I don't want to have to pay what my assessed value is. I just want to negotiate it. Here, $5. How about that?
It's asking for trouble.
And what's the foundational reason that we're in this position? It's, again, the volatility of the tax assessments. We had one value for that parcel before it sold. A few months later, the value shot up 6 times. So it's that unpredictability that really chases away investment in this county. It makes it very difficult to plan for the future, to be able to decide to start building in this community. And so, it's a $3 billion development offer on the southern end of that parcel, an extra $2 billion of investment in the northern end of that parcel. It's just a shame to chase away that kind of investment. It gets people working, it gets to spread out the tax burden, and it helps, again, when we build, to put downward pressure on property tax rates and downward pressure on residential tax bills.
All right. I mean, speaking of volatility, Mr. Kagi, you've gotten some criticism of the seemingly different property tax assessment levels for properties that might appear to be the same. The Hines campaign has alleged that your own Oak Park home was assessed 19% lower, while other homes on your block there went up 32%. What would account for such a discrepancy?
I got to correct the record there because you're leaving something out. In the cycle before, the assessment on my home was raised 61%, so that I have the highest assessed value per square foot on my block, in my community. And I think it's important not to leave facts out like that, because we voluntarily had the assessment go up on our house.
So are you saying
61%?
The other houses on your block, similar houses, are assessed at a similar level?
That we're the highest assessed house per square foot on the block, and of similar houses in other communities. And I think, and that's what the Tribune, when they wrote about this, they actually had a long chart that basically said, okay, we understand that the Assessor Kagi's tax assessment was raised earlier than his neighbors in the community, and that's why I that's still why I pay the highest assessment in the block and in the community.
Is that, Mr. Hines,
So again, it's the
adequate explanation?
Again, it's the departure from market value. You know, the law is very clear. You're supposed to assess these properties based on market value. It is unreasonable to expect that his home would be affected by the market in a different way than the rest of Oak Park.
Well,
so his value of his house in the last reassessment went down. The value of everyone else's home in Oak Park went up. And it's this volatility that he keeps instilling into our assessment system, where we're just departing from market value. It's difficult to predict where these assessments are going. It chases away investment.
You're not being honest with viewers, because I was underassessed by the Barrios administration, and we raised the assessment to our house up to market value, and it went up 61%.
Oh, let me ask you this, since you bring this up, Mr. Hines. What would you do to make sure that there wasn't this kind of volatility, or that there was consistency with these market rates?
Well, the most important thing is to have good, clean data, a professional staff, and an experienced assessor that can have good, clean data that goes into a model that makes sense, that produces a credible result on the other side. And so we don't have that right now. If you took a random sample of 100 property descriptions on the residential side in Cook County and then walked and took a look at the actual built environment, they won't match. I take a lot of continuing education with assessors from across the nation, and one of the games that I like to play in between breaks in the class is I'll ask other assessors, do you have a property record card and a sketch for every property in your jurisdiction? And they'll say, of course, I have a sketch for every property in my jurisdiction. We don't have that in Cook County. When you FOIA sketches from the county assessor's office, if you FOIA 100 sketches, you'll get 60 sketches back. And so the data, the underlying foundational data used to produce the assessment, is so rife with errors that you cannot produce a credible result on the other side. And so while the assessment of his home in Oak Park is an expression of this volatility where we're not matching the market, how could you say that every house in Oak Park had experienced an increase in value, yet his own home experienced a decrease in value?
But you're saying it had gone up 61% earlier, and then it went down.
Then obviously it wasn't matching the market. He did the assessment in 2020. He
I got to talk about the building permits, because he brought this up. I think we have to roll back to when I took over this office in 2018. This office was one of the most corrupt offices in America. It was the office that you used to work in, where you were a field inspector, supposed to be providing us with those sketches and data. There was a lot that was missing. We had a 1970s computer system, we had data that was out of date, and we had assessments that were punishing people at the bottom end of the spectrum. The nation's greatest expert on property taxes did a study of the 6 years of our residential assessments and found that they're within industry standards for the first time in the history of our office for equity and for accuracy. And does that mean that we're perfect? Absolutely not. We need to get more data. I'm working with my top 15 peers in America who struggle with the same issue of making sure that all the permits are reflected in the system. You know, what you left out, Pat, is the Tribune reported that we've found more than double the amount of properties off the rolls every year that were than the previous two administrations. So we're showing improvement. Can we still get better? Sure, but that is not a panacea. No matter how much data you have, if you have conflict of interest like you're talking about, I mean, you've taken money from Trump donors who've given a gargantuan amount of money to Trump. What do they and those property tax appeals lawyers see in you rather than me? I think it's a kind of predictability that's bad for homeowners.
And we've had that.
Okay, so again, an excuse, a false choice. He's had 2,634 days to get a handle on what the built environment that he's supposed to be assessing
is. How many parcels are we talking about total?
There's 1.9 million parcels.
Yeah, and we've doubled the discovery rate each year of the previous two administrations.
This is great. So he's claiming credit for omitted assessments and putting properties back on the tax rolls because he's #1 in missing properties. He's missed more new properties than any other assessor in the history of the office. And so then when he has to try and put them back on the tax rolls after they're missing, he wants to take credit for having the most missing properties put back on the tax rolls. Well,
you know that the Tribune's reporting show that we've doubled the performance.
Although, all right, let me bring up a Chicago Tribune investigation since you brought that up, Mr. Hines. 2024. Mr. Kagan found that your office misclassified hundreds of properties. It resulted in $444 million unaccounted for. And we know with the property taxes, this one pool of money, if something goes down here, then something has to go up here. That has to equal out. So is that indication of mismanagement?
I'm happy to address that. So again, this has been a perennial problem in the office. We've doubled the performance of the prior two administrations. A follow-up article from the Tribune found that almost all those properties came onto the roll. And I want everyone out there to put this into context. A couple $100 million is about the reduction on a couple of data centers that are happening at the Cook County Board of Review. I want you to multiply that by hundreds of times, because it is hundreds of times more impactful for a homeowner, those burdens being passed on to them by property tax appeals lawyers working their trade at the Cook County Board of Review commissioners, because every cut that those big commercial buildings get is more burden on homeowners. And it's not hundreds of millions of dollars, it's many billions of dollars. And the data shows that it's hundreds of times more than any issue with missing properties being added to the rolls, which again, we've doubled the performance of our predecessors, and I work with our top peers in the rest of the United States who struggle with the same issue.
So the Tribune article claimed that there were $444 million of missing property. And in the article, they said there were so many of them, they were everywhere, we got tired of looking. So he's missed hundreds of millions of dollars of assessable property every single year that he's been in office. Just today, at the township office, I heard from a taxpayer, a disabled veteran, who consolidated two parcels. He had a house and a side lot. He was tired of receiving two tax bills, wanted to consolidate them and get them into one tax bill. He called, the Assessor Kagi has now reassessed his house and just assessed it for vacant land. He's missing his house. So as a disabled veteran, he's not going to be able to get his disabled veterans benefits that he's earned, that he's entitled to. He's going to get a $14,000 extra tax bill that he shouldn't have to get, because Assessor Kagi can't find the house that's there. This is happening over and over and over again every year that he's been in office. If you can't get a grasp of what the built environment is that you're supposed to assess, how can we trust, after 2,634 days, that you should have another 4 terms to continue to miss these properties, to continue to have the volatility, to continue to throw taxpayers out of their homes?
We're doubling the amount of properties that we're discovering every year than was found every year in the previous administration.
You're saying under Barrios there were more
there were more. And I'm working on a federal initiative with our top 15 peers who struggle with the same issue. You know, we have 133 municipalities. Each of them have different building permits. I think all your viewers know that some building activity doesn't get reflected in permits. Some of our villages are more efficient than others in getting those data to us, but we are doing better. That's what the Tribune article showed, that we're getting better than prior administrations, that we eventually caught all those properties. And again, I think, you know, the thing that's predictable here is that commercial properties have been cut far too low, and that is the biggest inequity in our system.
And I do want to get more into that. Mr. Hines, he brought up the fact that you did work in Barrios' office. I mean, does that signify that you're part of that old guard?
So I have the advantage of 30 years of experience in the Cook County property taxes. And so I've worked for Assessor Houlihan, Assessor Barrios, and the current Assessor, Assessor Kagi. So he's made the claim that prior administrations were far worse. So he receives a permit for every construction start in this county. And his is the first administration to ignore the permits at the volume that he's ignoring these permits. He's closing out permits without inspecting them. There's fraudulent field inspection reports making testing the field inspections that never happened, while you could see some aerial photos that the day of that those buildings were built. And so he's not being very honest about his record on what he's doing with these building permits, with the construction starts, with the data that he has, the tools that he has, to make sure that he has a grasp of what the built environment looks like in this county. It's been 2,634 days. He still doesn't have a handle on what is the built environment that he's supposed to be taxing.
Where it was before.
All right.
And again, if the measure of what things were being done in the Barrios administration is what constitutes qualified, I think that might be why those property tax appeals lawyers see that you're in the tank for them.
All right, well, Mr. Hines, but how do you assure voters that you aren't part of that old guard, the old boys club, the Barrios, you know, giving favors to buddies club, if you were working as an assessor under him or as a field operator?
So I don't have a choice as a frontline employee who the boss ends up being, okay? And so Barrios
was elected, you know, by Cook County voters.
Exactly. And so Barrios was a failed assessor followed by another failed assessor. And so again, he's making this false choice, that you have a choice between a failed, corrupt administration followed by a failed administration. Those are your only two choices. There's a third choice. You can have someone with 30 years of experience who knows what they're doing, who can find the properties that are out there to be taxed, that can have a handle on what the built environment looks like, and produce an assessment that's credible, that our taxpayers can have confidence in. I've spent 30 years of my career as a tenacious advocate for middle-class residential taxpayers. I spent every day on the phone, on the front lines, dealing with the fallout of what he is doing right now. I have a taxpayer who had a fire in their home. As you know, I'm a volunteer fireman. I actually pulled the line and helped put that fire out. A few months later, that taxpayer came to my office and wanted to get that property some tax relief. Assessor Kagi still assessed that burned out house as if it was still there, if it was still assessable. The next year, they removed the house. Assessor Kagi still assessed that house, even though it was vacant land, as if the house was still there. They received their insurance settlement. They built a new house the following year. Assessor Kagi assessed the new house on January 1st. His position was that when the sun set on December 31st, an old house was there. When the sun rose on January 1st.
Was this in LaGrange?
This was in Western Springs.
All right, well,
I think we need.
Do you know that parcel, or do you want to respond?
I don't know that. I don't know that individual parcel, but what I will tell you is, in these 1.9 million, we have done more outreach than any other assessor's office in the history of this administration. We've set records 3 straight years. We do 1 event per business day. As I said the record, we're catching more properties that were omitted than before. Third-party studies are showing that our residential assessments are within industry standards for the first time in the history of this office. And by the way, we have more people enrolled in their exemptions than ever before. And this is because of the outreach work that we've done. You mentioned disabled veterans. It used to be that disabled veterans every year had to demonstrate their disability to our office, and even if they lost limbs. We got legislation passed so that if you had 100% permanent disability, your exemption automatically renewed. People with disabilities used to have to provide a doctor's note to our office to get that exemption. We've got legislation passed working with advocates in the community so that if you've demonstrated your disability to another state agency, it automatically renews. So we now have double the amount of people getting exemption for people with disabilities.
I mean, there's things like senior exemption, service exemption, but I want to go back to this issue of the shifting burden from commercial to homeowner. Right now, commercial properties are taxed at 25% of their value, residential 10%. Would you continue that? Is that
Indeed, yes.
You would continue that?
Right. It gives us an opportunity to provide relief for residential taxpayers, which is the #1 focus.
And you would continue that as well, it's 25 and 10.
Absolutely. It prevails in most states, including
because I'm sure a lot of commercial interests would like to get that number more equal.
They sure would. They talk about it. And, our closest competitors in Indiana and Minnesota and Tennessee, they have this kind of a classified system, and we should have it so that it's better for homeowners. But I got to tell you, who do the commercial property owners see as in being in the tank predictable for them? It's my opponent. I'm the tenacious fighter for homeowners. And I think the property tax appeals lawyers see an opportunity to sneak one by and get away with getting rid of an assessor who's been good.
Well, now Mr. Hines, you have said you're for the homeowner. You're for the middle-class homeowner. So,
and my record proves it.
Respond to.
Sure. So when I became the township assessor out in Lyons Township, first thing I did was audited the data. Asked for corrections. We found 30 properties that were not on the tax rolls. We asked Assessor Kagi to put them back on the tax rolls. He was unable to do so. We went to the Board of Review and had them put on last minute so that my other taxpayers didn't have to pay for housing millionaires next door's tax bill. We also did an incredible amount of outreach. We increased the number of exemptions that were being taken care of. But we also corrected a lot of errors and got some certificates of errors for our taxpayers so they can get some refunds for the errors that were coming out of his office. For the work that we had done, we were awarded in March the most outstanding performance for a large assessment jurisdiction in the state of Illinois by the Illinois Property Assessment Institute. That's the organization that licenses assessors in this state. And we earned that award by correcting the errors that are coming out of the county assessor's office. We did that to keep residential taxpayers in their home.
For our work, and third-party studies are showing that for the first time, our residential assessments are within industry standards for accuracy and uniformity. And we're so proud of that work. And you don't have to take my word for it. The people who do the work in our office, our employees, who suffered so much because their professionalism was denigrated under the prior assessor. They know him well, and they know me, and they endorsed my campaign.
All right, we'll talk about endorsements, but we're going to take another commercial break here. The home stretch on this race when we come back. Stay tuned.
website today.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to our debate for Cook County Assessor. Hopefully you're learning everything and taking notes about how this system works when you get your property tax bill. Now you know how the sausage is made, and everybody has to pay those property taxes. 1.9 million parcels here in Cook County. You know, Mr. Hines, Mr. Kagi brought up this process, and let's like kind of unpack it. This has been going on for decades. It was a process created by the General Assembly where there's a board of review of 3 elected commissioners, or if you don't like your assessment, you hire a lawyer, you go to the board of review, you make your argument, maybe they drop drop those rates, maybe they don't, and it's made a lot of money for these property tax attorneys like Mike Madigan, Ed Burke. Why does this system exist, and should it change?
Well, taxpayers do have to have some recourse if they receive an unjust assessment. And so the foundational part of our assessment comes out of the county assessor's office. So it's incredibly important that the county assessor get the assessment right the first time, so that we have an assessment book that's accurate, that our taxpayers have confidence in, and that the county assessor can defend. And so right now, there is a ton of appeals inside the system. It's far too many appeals. The best way to bring down the number of appeals is to produce an accurate assessment book right away from the beginning. It'll cut down on appeals, it'll restore taxpayer confidence, and it's the best way to provide justice for our taxpayers. Because while 1/3 of them file an appeal, 2/3 of them do not. And so 2/3 of the taxpayers will accept whatever number comes out of the county assessor's office.
They might not know that process is available to them.
Agreed, but
They can also appeal in the assessor's office as well.
They can, but there's no greater example of this injustice than the folks who received a spike on the west side and the south side. The appeal rates on the west side and the south side are next to nothing, yet they're the ones in this last reassessment that received the most unjust assessment, the largest spike. And so they're the ones who should be out there the most. And so it's important foundationally that the county assessor get the assessment book right the first time so that we can keep people in their homes.
All right, and Mr. Kagi, you have blamed the Board of Review over and over again for this dynamics, but this is the system that's in place right now. How does it change?
Well, the way it changes is that because we pushed the county to study what the impact of these reductions were on commercial properties that the Board of Review is giving out. Because we asked the county to measure, every time there's a sale of commercial property, it's like a test. Who is more accurate, our assessment or the Board of Review? We had a study done by national experts, a panel of national experts. It showed that our values on average were in line with prices that were paid in the following year, but that the Board of Review's numbers were being cut by 25% too low, 24% too low, 10% too low. And that, every time they get a cut like that, it shifts burdens on the homeowners. And that's what drove up every Chicago homeowner's bill by $700 last year and doubled people's taxes in Englewood. It accounted for almost the entire increase in South Shore, Austin, and other neighborhoods, and it's unfair and it shouldn't have happened. So how do we fix that? That same panel of experts came up with a roadmap with more than a dozen recommendations. We're working with the Board of Review on pushing those recommendations through. We're really pleased that other county officials have worked with us and the Board Review so that they've started to accept some of these recommendations. That's how we're going to get this done. But you can't have an assessor who mildly accepts these reductions and doesn't say anything. You need someone who fights for the homeowner every day, who fights for things like these studies and these recommendations. That's what I've done. And you need someone who's not conflicted. No amount of data will solve a problem if you have conflicts of interest. That's what the Inspector General of Cook County has said, that it's a critical vulnerability to take donations in the morning from property tax appeals lawyers.
Were you talking about
when
the Board
they're
of Review
making reductions. They were talking about the Board of Review, and they said the Board of Review,
because these are elected, they have to get elected too.
Right, should adopt an ethics policy that doesn't take donations from the people practicing from before them. That's a critical vulnerability. We adopted that from the time we got in office. I put in place a strict ethics order, and my opponent in 22 respected that ethical standard too, but my opponent this time is embracing the tax lawyers with gusto.
Well, all right, so for the Board of Review, would you support those ethics standards for those Board of Review commissioners?
So that's up to the county board, but so he's trying to find a scapegoat here. So you had a heat map up earlier where the assessment had spiked. And the heat map also matches where the property tax burden has gone to. So he's trying
we can show that heat map
he's
again.
trying to blame, he's trying to make the claim that the Board of Review is the reason that property taxes have doubled on the west side and the south side. He refuses to take any accountability for what he's done with the assessment. He did the assessment in 21, he did the assessment in 2024. He doubled and in some cases tripled the assessment.
I'll take the accountability. The heat map would have looked different if my assessments hadn't been changed at the Board of Review. If my assessments
That's not true.
If my assessments hadn't been changed in 2/3 of the black neighborhoods and Latino neighborhoods in Chicago, bills would have been flat or down.
Your assessments were lower for those neighborhoods. You're saying universally.
No, what I'm saying is that commercial properties were assessed higher, so they would have been paying more share of the burden. But because those values were cut so low, every single cut for a commercial property
drives
owner
up everyone else's.
Drives up everyone else's bills. So under my assessments, the heat map wouldn't have looked like that. And that's the treasurer's data talking, not me. With my assessments, it was $500 million a burden that would have been on commercial properties, not on homeowners. And when those properties were cut at the Board of Review, $700 was shifted onto every single home in Chicago, and that's what caused that heat map to go up.
We've gone over that, but I want to ask you, Mr. Kagi, another investigation. This is from the Sun-Times. It found problems with your office's senior freeze program in 2024. For instance, a 54-year-old City Hall lobbyist received a senior freeze despite being 11 years too young. Are there problems here with oversight and management in that these mistakes with the senior freeze happened?
Actually, in the follow-up to those articles, they named a few cases where it seemed suspicious, people getting the senior freeze. But in almost all of those cases, people were actually entitled to get the freeze. So I think the follow-up stories are just as important. That's why you need a fair assessor who gives everyone due process. What the record shows is that when we came into office, seniors had to show that they were over 65 every year, which is an incredible imposition. We got past auto renewal of the senior freeze, and the state has, auto renewal of the senior exemption, and because of that, 60,000 more senior households are getting the senior exemption without that bureaucratic rigmarole. And the state has found that we dramatically reduce fraud. We can do the same thing with the freeze by checking incomes with automatic renewal. That's one of our bills before the legislature.
Mr. Hines, you want to respond?
Certainly. So in my role as the taxpayer advocate for the 45,000 taxpayers in Lyons Township, I have lots of exemption problems that come out of his office. Most recently, he had erroneously done the base year for all of our senior freezes. So we had so many seniors who received a letter ahead of the tax bill coming out. Brace yourself, there's going to be a giant spike in your property tax burden because in prior years we got the math wrong on how to do
in the
senior
Barrios
freeze.
administration, we had to fix that.
He's also lost whole sections of files for the senior exemption, the senior freeze, where seniors apply for their exemptions, they send it into a black hole, he drops it, then they receive the tax bill and receive a tax bill for more than they would anticipate. And then I'm left to clean up the mess, which I'm always doing, is cleaning up the errors that come out of his office to get some justice for my residential taxpayers so that we can keep them in their homes. And so his record on handling the exemptions, which is a simple bureaucratic exercise, is absolutely dismal.
The record shows we have record enrollments in exemptions. There are 60,000 more senior households getting the senior exemption because of a bill that we worked to get passed. The General Assembly didn't used to trust our office. That's why seniors had to prove every year that they were still over 65, which was ridiculous. We'd showed, because we'd improved our operations and data and could cut down with fraud, that the senior exemption could automatically renew. It makes such a difference to seniors not to go through that bureaucratic rigmarole. We did the same thing for people with disabilities. They don't have to turn in that doctor's note now. Now there's double the amount of people getting exemption for people with disabilities. So we're really proud of our record on exemptions. And I just got to say, the senior freeze, there are 130,000 seniors who get that. They shouldn't have to come in the cold and in walkers to our office just to make sure that they're getting it. There's a computer in Springfield that has their income information that could automatically renew. And we have the support of AARP and advocates for seniors behind that legislation.
All right, before we end, I want, just more 101 here for viewers. The way the properties are assessed, it's every 3 years. It's triennially. There's 3 quadrants, the north, west, south, and so 3 years. Is triennial assessments, is that the way to keep going?
Certainly, we should stay with the triennial. It used to be a quadrennial, but we lowered it to a triennial so that we could have less volatility in our system, which is the #1 thing that we need to do. We have to have predictability, less volatility, and we have to produce an assessment book that taxpayers can have confidence in.
Triennial, keep it that way?
I talked to my peers in the rest of the country. Maricopa County in Arizona has almost as many parcels as we do. New York does. Harris County, where Houston is, they do their reassessments every year. That is a goal for our office to get to that too, so that we have fewer annual changes with markets that can happen over 3 years. It's going to take a little bit more in terms of getting data. We need a data bill to be passed. That's part of the roadmap that this national panel of experts called for. Passing that bill will need a little bit more hiring, but we're on the way.
All right, I feel like that's something AI might be able to do one day, is get all that data in, a second.
I got to tell you, we're not going to let AI get in control of something like this. We want humans at the wheel.
Okay, good point. Well, I want to thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
Pat Hines, Assessor Fritz Kagi, good luck to both of you, and thank you for being in. Hopefully this debate help make you help your choice when you go to the voting booth. Remember, you can vote early to avoid the election day rush. Early voting has been underway in Cook County since Thursday, and let's take a look at the numbers to see how many voters have already headed to the polls. Chicago Board of Elections says it's received 283 ballots so far the March 17th primary election. That's not a lot. There's a lot more to go. Okay, folks.
I think we need more than that.
You need more than that. But March 17th is the primary election. And catch up on the first two debates on YouTube and online and streaming. And we are back with more Chicago Report debates next Tuesday and Wednesday. Good night, everybody.